At 5 o'clock, Ed Loyce finished work, put on his hat and coat, got into his car, and drove across town to his TV sales store. He was tired. His back and shoulders hurt from digging dirt in the basement and moving it to the backyard. But he felt good about fixing the house foundation himself. It was getting dark. The sunset shone over busy commuters, people with tired faces, women carrying bags, and students heading home from the university, all mixing with clerks and businessmen. He stopped at a red light, then started driving again. The store had been open without him. He would arrive just in time to help out for dinner, check the day's sales, and maybe even sell a few TVs himself. As he drove slowly past the small park in the middle of the street, he noticed there were no parking spots in front of his store. Loyce TV Sales and Service. He cursed under his breath and made a U-turn. Again he passed the little park with its lonely fountain and bench. From a lamppost, something dark was hanging, swaying slightly in the wind, looking like a dummy. Loyce rolled down his window to see better. "What is that?" he wondered. It looked strange. Maybe it was a display from the Chamber of Commerce. He made another U-turn to look again. As he approached, he realized it wasn't a dummy. His heart raced as sweat formed on his face and hands. It was a body, a dead person. "Look at that!" Loyce shouted to Don Ferguson, who was coming out of the store. "This is a big deal, Ed. I can't just leave the guy hanging there," Don replied, buttoning his coat. "Can you see it? How long has it been there?" Ed was alarmed. "Why is everyone just walking by?" Don lit a cigarette. "Calm down, Ed. There must be a good reason for it being there." "A reason? What kind of reason?" Don shrugged. "Maybe it's some civic thing, like the time they put up that wrecked car for the Traffic Safety Council." "How would I know?" Jack Potter from the shoe shop joined them. "What's going on?" he asked. "There's a body hanging from the lamppost," Loyce said. "I'm calling the cops." "They must know about it, or it wouldn't be there," Potter replied. "I have to get back inside," Don said, returning to the store. "Business comes first." Loyce felt frantic. "Can't you see? A dead man." "I saw it earlier when I went out for coffee," Potter said. "You mean it's been there all afternoon?" Loyce asked, feeling more desperate. "Yes. What's the big deal?" Potter checked his watch. "I have to go. See you later." The crowd walked past the park, and a few people glanced up at the dark bundle but kept moving. No one stopped to help. "I'm losing my mind," Loyce whispered. He stepped into traffic, ignoring angry horns. He reached the park where the body was. The man looked middle-aged. His clothes were torn and dirty. Loyce had never seen him before. His face turned slightly away, spinning in the wind. His skin had deep cuts, and blood was dried on his clothes. His glasses dangled from one ear, and his mouth was open, tongue blue. Lois felt sick. He tried to pull himself together and went back to the sidewalk, shaking with fear and confusion. Why was this happening? Why didn't anyone notice? He bumped into a small man on the sidewalk. "Watch it," the man said. "Oh, it's you, Ed." Lois nodded. "Hi, Jenkins. What's wrong? You look ill." "The body. In the park." "Okay, Ed," Jenkins said, leading him into the store's entrance. Margaret Henderson from the jewelry store joined them. "Is something wrong?" "Ed's not feeling well," Jenkins said. Lois pulled away. "How can you stand here? Don't you see it?" "What body?" Margaret asked, looking scared. "The body! Hanging there!" Lois shouted. More people gathered, asking if he was okay. "The body!" he yelled, trying to get through them. "Call the police! Ed, get a doctor!" "He must be sick," someone said. "Or drunk," another person added. Lois pushed past the crowd. He stumbled, seeing curious faces all around. He ran toward his store, where he saw Ferguson talking to a customer and Pete Foley setting up a TV. Lois shouted, but they couldn't hear him over the noise of the street. "Do something," he yelled. "Something's wrong." The crowd parted for two police officers who approached him. "Name?" one cop asked, writing in a notebook. "Lois," he said, wiping his forehead. "Edward C. Lois. Listen to me. There's a body hanging from the lamppost." "Address?" the officer interrupted. 1368 Hurst Road." "That's here in Pikeville?" "Yes." Lois felt hope. "Did I miss something? Is that why I didn't see it?" After a pause, the officer replied, "Yes, you missed the explanation." "So it's supposed to be there?" "Yes, for everyone to see." Lois weakly smiled. "I thought something terrible was happening, like a violent group taking over." He wiped his face, still shaking. "I'm glad to know it's okay." The police car drove towards the Hall of Justice. The sun had set, and the streets were dark. "I feel better now," Lois said. "I was just a bit excited. I should get back to my store. My employees haven't eaten." The officers remained silent. "It won't take long," the driver said. "Just a few minutes." "I hope it's short," Lois mumbled. The car slowed for a stoplight. "I guess I caused a stir," he said, suddenly opening the door. He jumped out into the street and ran into the crowd. Behind him, he heard shouting and running feet. They weren't police. He knew every officer in Pikeville after 25 years in business. He ducked into a hardware store, then raced to the back and through the door. He tripped but got up, running up concrete steps and over a fence. He entered a dark alley filled with trash and old boxes. He could see the street ahead with its lights and people. To his right was the police station. He was too close. He needed to get away. Lois moved carefully down the alley, passing City Hall with its old yellow building and dark windows. Above City Hall, he noticed a dark area in the sky. A buzzing noise filled the air, making him want to cover his ears. Looking up, he saw shapes moving in the darkness. They looked like giant insects, landing on the roof and disappearing inside the building. Lois felt sick and fascinated at the same time. He was tired and in shock. On the steps of City Hall were men coming out of the building, but they weren't normal. They looked like aliens, not human. Lois crouched behind a fence, feeling horrified. One of the shapes fluttered up and blended in with the others. He realized these weren't real men, but insect-like creatures that could disguise themselves. He stood up slowly, aware that it was dark and they might see him. He left the alley and stepped onto the street. People were still around, but not as many. He moved towards a bus stop where a large bus arrived. Lois squeezed into the bus and took a seat at the back. It started moving, and he felt a little more relaxed. He looked around at the tired faces of the other passengers. They looked ordinary, like people coming home from work. A man next to him read a newspaper while a young woman stared ahead, lost in thought. Lois felt different, realizing he had escaped their control. He wasn't one of them, but maybe they had missed him. He had come out of his basement at the right moment. A man a few seats away watched him closely, and Lois tensed. Was he one of them, or just another person they hadn't caught? The bus stopped, and an elderly man got on. He exchanged a knowing glance with the watchful man, making Lois nervous. Lois jumped to his feet, and as the bus moved, he opened the emergency door and stepped out into the street. "Hey!" the bus driver yelled, slamming on the brakes. "What the hell?" Lois squeezed through. The bus was slowing down. There were houses all around him in a neighborhood with lawns and tall buildings. Behind him, a bright-eyed man jumped up, and an older man stood up too. They were chasing him. Lois jumped out of the bus and hit the ground hard, rolling onto the curb. Pain washed over him. He fought to stay conscious. He got to his knees, but fell back down again. The bus had stopped, and people were getting off. Lois felt around and grabbed a rock from the gutter. He got up, grunting in pain. A figure appeared in front of him, the bright-eyed man with a book. Lois kicked him. The man gasped and fell down. Lois swung the rock at him. The man screamed and tried to crawl away. "Stop! Please listen." But Lois hit him again, and a horrible crunching sound filled the air. The man's voice faded into a bubbling cry. Lois scrambled backward. Others were around him now. He ran awkwardly down the sidewalk and up a driveway. None of them followed him. They bent over the man he had just attacked. The bright-eyed man who had chased him. Had he made a mistake? But it was too late to worry about that. He needed to escape, away from them. He had to get out of Pikeville. Ed, Janet said nervously as she backed away. What is it? What? Ed slammed the door behind him and walked into the living room. Close the shades, fast. Janet moved to the window. But do what I say. Is anyone else here? Number just the twins. They're upstairs. What happened? You look so strange. Why are you home? Ed locked the front door and searched the house. In the kitchen, he took a big butcher knife from a drawer and ran his finger along its sharp edge. He returned to the living room. Listen to me, he said. I don't have much time. They know I escaped and will be looking for me. Escaped? Janet's face was filled with confusion and fear. Who? The town has been taken over. They're in control. It started at City Hall and the police department. They did something to the real people. What are you talking about? We've been invaded from another universe, another dimension. They are like insects. They can mimic us and control our minds. Your mind. My mind. Their entrance is in Pikeville. They've taken over everyone except me. We're up against a very powerful enemy, but they have weaknesses. That's our hope. They can make mistakes. Janet shook her head. I don't understand, Ed. You must be crazy. Crazy? Number just lucky. If I hadn't been in the basement, I'd be like the rest of you. Lois looked out the window. But we can't stand here talking. Get your coat. My coat. We're getting out of here, away from Pikeville. We need help to fight this. They can be beaten. They aren't perfect. It's going to be close. But we might make it if we hurry. Come on. He grabbed her arm roughly. Get your coat and call the twins. We're all leaving. Don't pack anything. White-faced, Janet went to get her coat. Where are we going? Ed pulled out a map from a drawer and spread it out. They'll have the highway blocked, but there's a back road to Oak Grove. I used it once. It's almost abandoned. Maybe they'll forget about it. The old ranch road? It's closed. No one is supposed to drive on it. I know. Ed put the map in his coat. That's our best chance. Now call the twins and let's go. Your car has gas, right? Janet was dazed. The Chevy? I filled it up yesterday. Call the twins? Ed unlocked the front door and looked outside. Nothing moved. Come on down, Janet called upstairs. We're going out for a while. Now, Tommy's voice came from above. Hurry up, Ed shouted. Get down here. Tommy appeared at the top of the stairs. I was doing my homework. We're starting fractions. Miss Parker said, if we don't finish, you can forget about fractions. Ed grabbed Tommy and pushed him toward the door. Where's Jim? He's coming. Jim slowly walked down the stairs. What's going on, Dad? We're going for a ride. A ride? Where? Ed turned to Janet. Leave the lights and the TV on. Go turn it on. He pushed her toward the TV. So they'll think we're still here? Then he heard a buzzing sound. He dropped down and pulled out the butcher knife. He was sickened as he saw something coming down the stairs at him, wings ablur as it aimed itself at him. It still looked a bit like Jimmy. It was small, a baby one. He saw the thing rushing at him with cold, multi-eyed, insect-like eyes. It was wearing a yellow t-shirt and jeans, still looking like his son. What was it doing? A stinger. Lois swung wildly at it. It flew back, buzzing frantically. He rolled and crawled toward the door. Tommy and Janet stood like statues, their faces blank, watching without expression. Lois swung again. This time, the knife hit the creature. It shrieked and fell. It hit the wall and fluttered down. Something rushed through his mind, an alien presence probing into him. He suddenly felt frozen. The mind touched his, shockingly. An alien feeling settled over him, and then it faded as the creature fell in a heap on the rug. It was dead. He kicked it over. It was an insect, a fly, dressed like his son Jimmy. He tightened his mind. There was no time to think about that now. He picked up his knife and moved toward the door. Janet and Tommy were still frozen, not moving. The car was outside, but he knew he couldn't get through. They would be waiting for him. It was 10 miles on foot, 10 long miles over rough ground, through fields and forests. He had to go alone. Lois opened the door. He looked back at his wife and son for a moment. Then he slammed the door and ran down the steps. A moment later, he was on his way, hurrying through the darkness toward the edge of town. The morning sun was bright. Lois stopped, gasping for breath, swaying. Sweat ran down into his eyes. His clothes were torn from crawling through the bushes and thorns. 10 miles on his hands and knees, crawling through the night. His shoes were muddy, and he was scratched and limping, utterly exhausted. But Oak Grove was ahead. He took a deep breath and walked down the hill. He stumbled twice, but picked himself up and kept going. His ears rang. Everything around him seemed to fade, but he was there. He had escaped Pikeville. A farmer in a field stared at him. A young woman from a house watched him in surprise. Lois reached the road and turned onto it. Ahead was a gas station and a drive-in. There were a couple of trucks, some chickens pecking the dirt, and a dog tied up. The white-clad attendant watched him suspiciously as he dragged himself up to the station. Thank God. He held onto the wall. I didn't think I would make it. They followed me almost all the way. I could hear them buzzing behind me. What happened? The attendant asked. Were you in an accident? Lois shook his head, tired. They have taken over the whole town, City Hall and the police station. I saw a man hanging from a lamppost. That was the first thing I noticed. They've blocked all the roads. I saw them hovering over cars coming in. I got past them around 4 this morning. I could feel them leave. And then the sun came up. The attendant nervously licked his lips. You're out of your mind. I should call a doctor. Get me into Oak Grove, Lois gasped. He sank down on the gravel. We need to start cleaning them out. We have to get going right away. They had a tape recorder running while he spoke. When he finished, the commissioner turned off the recorder and stood up. He thought for a moment, then lit a cigarette with a frown on his face. You don't believe me, Lois said. The commissioner offered him a cigarette, but Lois impatiently pushed it away. That's fine. The commissioner moved to the window and looked out at Oak Grove. I believe you, he said suddenly. Lois relaxed. Thank God. So you got away, the commissioner said, shaking his head. You were in your cellar instead of at work. A lucky chance. 1 in a million. Lois took a sip of black coffee. I have a theory, he murmured. What is it? About them. Who they are. They take over one area at a time, starting from the top, at the highest level. Once they control that, they move on to the next town. They spread slowly. I think it's been happening for a long time. A long time? Thousands of years. I don't think it's new.